to be mindful of their mics, and to keep yourself muted during the presentation. Of course, please feel free to use the chat feature. And folks, we have folks in the chat who will be able to answer any questions. And actually, let me see. In a little while, you should see there it is. So you should see now at the bottom of your Zoom screen, a globe icon. It should be next to reactions and apps. And it should say interpretation. We are going to have simultaneous interpretation in Spanish of this presentation. And so regardless of whether you're going to be listening in English or in Spanish, please select a language in that little globe option. It should show either English or Spanish. If you don't select a language, your audio might sound really odd. So it's really important that even if you're planning to listen in English, to please select English. And of course, for other folks, select Spanish. Okay. Yeah, so for some folks, especially those who are using mobile, as Kelly pointed out, you may need to go under the More menu to find the globe for interpretation.
We forgot to have music, y'all. We should have had music. It's okay. Just imagine us singing.
Alrighty, it seems the flow of folks has slowed down a bit. But of course, we'll be admitting folks as they come in. And hopefully everybody has had an opportunity to select their language. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to pop them in the chat. Again, we do ask that folks keep mics muted throughout the presentation. And of course, there is going to be a discussion period for Q&A at the end of the presentation. So there will be a part where folks can chime in and ask questions unmuted. All righty. Well, my name is Alexis Bay. I am with the Beyond Borders team as the legislative coordinator. I am here in Edinburgh, Texas. I use they, them pronouns. And I am super excited to be here with y'all. We really appreciate everybody taking time on a Tuesday evening to spend time with us to learn about the glorious legislature of our beautiful state. We're really excited to hopefully teach y'all something you may not have known, give you valuable information, learn a little bit about us, and of course have a interesting discussion at the end of the presentation. So again, welcome and thank you so much for being here. We do really appreciate your time and your presence. So this is our Lege 101 training. It's going to have a few things going on that you can find out about, including testifying, what is a bill, where do you park, which is sometimes the thing you don't think about, and then it's like the worst thing ever when you get to the Capitol and you're in a rush to go testify. And of course, how you can get involved and advocacy at the legislature. So we are going to go to the next slide. And of course, you know, who are we? Texas Civil Rights Project, TCRP. We have 3 programs. We're made up of 3 programs. So I mentioned Beyond Borders, that's the team I'm a part of. We also have criminal injustice and voting rights. For 30 plus years, we have been fighting in and out of the courts for Texans for their civil rights. If you would like to learn more about each individual program's specific work, please check out our website, our Twitter, we're all over social media. Each program has also put out their legislative priorities. So again, if you go on our Instagram or our Twitter, you can check out which each program is prioritizing this session as we go into the Lege. So I want to pass it to my amazing colleague, Jenny Hickson, who is going to explain to us the 101s of the Lege.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jenny Hickson, and I am based in San Antonio, and I am the Senior Advocacy Manager for our Criminal Injustice Program. So I'm going to do a slightly less entertaining version of the Schoolhouse Rocks. I'm just a bill. So next slide, please. So our Texas Legislature is made up of 2 chambers, which we're going to briefly talk about. It meets once every 2 years, and the primary purpose set out is to pass the budget for the next 2 years. And they meet for 140 days. But if y'all have followed the legislature for a while, you know that we have a lot of special sessions in Texas. So we have special sessions that are 30-day mini sessions, and these can only be called by the governor about a specific topic. We usually expect one to be called. And we also have committees within each of the houses that really do a lot of the daily work of the legislature. So next slide, we're going to get into the details. So the House and the Senate are both made up of elected representatives. They all represent a specific geographic area. If you don't know what area you're represented by, you can go on the Texas Legislature online and figure out where your reps are. I would encourage you to do that just so that you can both find out who you're represented by, but also take a look at the map for how most of these representatives, the areas that they cover, because it's not like a clean little box, and they are very weird shapes, and that's because of the gerrymandering that we've had in Texas. In the House, there are 150 members, and they are elected for 2-year terms. The Speaker of the House leads the House, and that Speaker is elected by the members of the House. For the Senate, there are 31 members. They have 4-year terms, and they are led by the Lieutenant Governor. So our Lieutenant Governor is Dan Patrick. The Lieutenant Governor in the Texas system of government has a lot of power, more power than the governor, some folks would say, because the Lieutenant Governor oversees the Senate. He decides which bills get referred to committees and names all the committee members, and also is kind of the tiebreaker in the event that there's a disagreement on procedural issues or just a tie in the Senate. So in our system of government, that's a pretty important role. The executive branch is made up of the governor, the lieutenant governor, and the Speaker of the House. So the next slide. So the most important kind of place, especially for where we are right now in the legislative session, is the work of the committees. So each branch has their own committees. They somewhat correlate, but they're named different things. So it's not like a one-to-one, necessarily a committee in the House is the same as a committee in the Senate. The Senate has 15 committees, 1 subcommittee, and 1 special committee. The House committees has 34 committees and 3 select committees. Each one of these committees has a chair, a vice chair, and members. The chairs kind of control and set the agenda and also help decide which bills can make it through actually getting a hearing in the committee. So the next slide, I don't want to jump forward. Oh, I'm okay. So the life cycle of a bill, I just got reminded to speak slower by our interpreter, so I'm going to talk slower. So bills are introduced in both the House of Reps and the Senate. So a bill can be introduced on either side, and each bill has to go through both sides. So we'll take it kind of one at a time. For the House of Representatives, the bill is introduced, they're filed. Bills have been filed starting since November 14th. So if you look at the dates, how many bills have been filed, it's a lot. And bills start being filed and you can start reviewing bills before session even starts. Once a bill is filed, it's sent to the committee. Usually that would make the most sense for it to be overseen. A lot of the bills, if you read the text, they could be sent to one of many places. And so that determination matters a lot. If a bill could be sent to criminal justice, or it could be sent to public health, or it could be sent to state affairs, all of those are different committees that have a different makeup. So where bills get sent matters a lot. Then if a bill is sent to the committee, it has to get onto the calendar of the committee to actually be discussed and voted out of committee. Bills can be killed at any point in this process. In the last legislative session, we had about 7,000 bills that were passed, that were filed. Only 1,000 made it through, and they kind of died at multiple places in this session. So once they get to a committee, then they have to be discussed by that committee and voted out of committee. So once they're voted out of committee, then they go to the floor of either the House or the Senate, where they have to be voted on twice. So generally, the Senate conducts that vote back to back. The House tends to have the votes separated a bit. And once it passes in the House, it has to go over to the Senate. Once it passes in the Senate, it has to go over to the House. And then the process starts all over again from the beginning. So when the bill goes through the process again on either the House or the Senate side, the bill then oftentimes is amended. And those amendments can do a lot of different things that we're not going to get into tonight. But what those amendments can do is change the nature of the bill to either make it so that it can garner more support, or sometimes so that it can kill the bill. So once the bill gets through both of those processes, then it actually goes to the governor. So the governor has three options. The governor can either veto it, the governor can just sit on it, and so the governor doesn't do anything, it still becomes law. Or the governor can sign it. So in our system of government, the governor, if they veto it, it can go back and then be voted on. If it gets 2/3 votes, it can become law, but that happens very, very rarely in Texas. So generally it's either dies in veto, or the governor doesn't sign it or signs it for it to become law. There are a couple of, let's see, what is the next slide? I forgot. All right, so if we go back one, sorry. There's a couple of different places, things that are important thinking about the legislative session. So in the legislative session, the first 60 days, you can only pass legislation that's part of the governor's emergency items or priorities. And so that's why when the governor gave his State of the State speech, it was really important to listen for the items that were going to be on that agenda, so that we knew for the first 60 days, what are the things that are going to be able to be passed. March 10th, which is coming up, is the date for unrestricted bills to be filed. So there are lots of deadlines that happen, special dates that happen within a legislative session. And at every point in the legislative session, lawmakers can start to slow down the process so that a bill won't get through. And again, that's another way that a bill can be killed. So I know I've said that several times. It's just important to know that a lot of what gets introduced doesn't make it much further than being introduced. And so the good news is, as someone who is interested in the legislature, you can have a voice in this process by getting involved, because there are lots of places to get rid of bad bills, and there are lots of places to have input on good bills that you want to move forward. A lot of that is through making relationships with lawmakers, specifically the lawmakers that are in charge of the different committees, or the lawmakers that wrote the text of the bill that you like or don't like. Okay, and I think now I'm going to pass it over to Roberto. And I think we're going to ask for questions at the end of this session. So if you have any questions, or if none of this makes sense, we can go ahead and take those at the end. You can put them in the chat.
Yes, thank you so much, Jenny, and thank you all for being here this evening. Y'all are taking time out of your lives to learn about our government, and this is so important. It shapes our world, it shapes our environment, it shapes so much of how we live here in Texas, and it's so important that this is accessible to everybody. Also, my name is Roberto. I am a senior advocacy manager with the Beyond Borders program. So a lot of my work is focused on immigration, border militarization, and today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about taking action at the Lege. I know, it can be a little bit difficult sometimes to look at all the difference at the flow chart that Jenny talked about. But when you put it into practice, it can become a little bit more simpler, and it can make more sense and can become more easy to understand. So that's what we're going to talk about right now. So one of the first things when you're going to be visiting the Capitol, especially if you're coming from out of town, but also even if you're here, some of these actions and things that you can do can take a really, really long time. And so what that means is having a plan, knowing exactly when you're going to come to the Capitol, who you're going to visit, what you're going to say, what you're going to leave behind is all very, very important. And so let's go to the next one. One of those things is really telling your story. Can we go back one too, Carla? If there are different actions that you can take at the Capitol, involve testifying, involve meeting your legislator, going to a rally, dropping off packets. If you're not meeting with legislators or staff, you can drop off questions that you want your legislators to ask in committee hearings. So as a bill moves through the whole process, as it goes to the House or the Senate and goes to hearings where they're going to be scrutinized, that's where you have many different ways to really try to get your representatives to kill a bill, to push for something that you really care about, or to really be critical and ask these agencies, the people who run the government, why they do things a certain way. And so we're going to talk next about what it means to leave notes behind, to tell your story. But it's really important that you get these things lined up and organized, because if you are coming to the Capitol from a different part of the state, you have a few days. You may have just one shot to really kind of get all the things that you need to get done in that one day. Or even if you're here and you're taking time off of work, you may need to take some time. That's really important time. So we're going to talk about what you should be pitching when you're here. One of the things that we like to really focus on, or what's really powerful here at the Capitol, is making sure that you have your facts, but also that you're telling a really good story, and you're giving concrete asks to your representatives. So we have these 3 items here. The elements of a pitch: you want to talk about what you feel. Why does this issue matter to you? Why does having more troopers on the border matter to you? Why does closing juvenile detention centers matter to you? And what do you know? For instance, when it comes to troopers, we know that they are ticketing a lot of people, and so I want to bring data with me when I come to the Capitol. And then what do we want our legislators to do? These past few weeks, they've been having hearings on the budget. And so we want them to not put as much money on Operation Lone Star, and instead we want them to put it on to invest in our communities, for instance. And so these are some examples. Let's go to the next one. And this is what it looks like when you give a testimony. So what we have here is a sample story. This is based on a pseudonym. And the way that this story starts off, it's a testimony. Oftentimes, whether you're providing written testimony, oral testimony, written meaning you're submitting it online to the Texas House of Representatives or the Senate, and then orally meaning you're presenting at a hearing. So you go to a hearing room, you register, and you read your statement. And that can sometimes last anywhere from 2 to 3 minutes. So it's a very, very short amount of time. You have to get across something that is very meaningful to you. And in this case, we see in this testimony this pseudonym of Crystal Vigil. She's talking about her child, and she's connected to Houston. So she's talking about what community she comes from. There are representatives that she is trying to get the attention of. Later on, she talks about the issue, children being put in child prisons in Texas, for instance. Let's move to the next slide. I can also speak a little fast, so I'm going to try to slow down. In the third part of this testimony, Crystal brings up the data. So many children who are placed in child prisons, and there are still 5 in the state of Texas, were students, were special education students. So students with a SPED plan or who need additional accommodations, but for some reason were placed into a prison. And instead of being given treatment, support, everything you need to be made successful, they were incarcerated. And so the final thing is the ask. And Crystal talks specifically about these 2 bills, and she wants to make it so that way it's harder to, well, it's impossible to put children by definition in prisons, and raises it to the age of 18. So that's sort of what an example testimony can look like. It needs to be short, maybe 100 to 300 words. And if you're like me, you can speak a little fast and maybe get a few more words in, but because you only have 2 to 3 minutes, you really need to get the feel, the know, the data, and the ask in there. Let's go to the next one. So now actually getting to the Capitol, how do you get there? There is a parking, so the Capitol complex is pretty large and it can be a little bit intimidating. So, you spend your few weeks typing up your testimony, you have the issue that you're really passionate about, you tell your story and you have it written. And so you have your copy and you're ready to come to testify at the Capitol. There is a really actually pretty well set up Capitol visitors garage. If you go around 8 a.m., it can tend to be pretty empty unless there's something really big going on. It is at the corner, the access street is usually around 12th Street, but it's on San Jacinto or San Jacinto and 12th Street. And for the first 2 hours, it's free. A whole day, I think, costs either $10 or $12. So it can be it can be a bit affordable. And then once you go from the Capitol, from the visitors garage, it's a quick, 1 to 3 minute walk from the visitors garage over to the Capitol. And it's just west. So you can see this map up here. There are also ADA accessible pathways to the Capitol, and there are various different signs. Once you walk over or once you go over from the visitors garage to the Capitol, right at the entrance of the Capitol grounds, you can see signs showing which way has ADA accessible pathways like ramps, for instance. Let's move on to the next one. So this is the map to the Capitol complex. Up is north. And that's what I was talking about. The red circle is the garage, and then right in the center, of course, is our state capitol. Let's move on here. Once you get inside, it can also be a little bit confusing, but getting in is pretty simple and straightforward. Security is relatively fast. You just need to take everything out of your pockets and put it into the bin. And then if you bring, a backpack or something like that, or if you have a briefcase with your materials, you also will need to put that through an X-ray scanner. And then you'll walk through a metal detector. That process can take anywhere from 5 to 20 minutes. It may take long if there is a line. But usually if you get there early enough, it's 5 minutes or less. It can be pretty quick. Just depends on whether or not you run into a group of people. The next thing is that there are quite a few maps inside the Capitol itself, but there are also maps online. We have this one here, and so this one shows some of the elevators, the restrooms. The elevators are really important to know and to identify. So right after you get into pass through security, the elevators are typically right there. And that will get you down to what's called the Capitol extension, though that is the additional hearing in committee rooms beneath the Capitol. And that is often where you go if you want to testify, or also go to the Capitol Grill where you can get some good snacks. Let's go to the next one. One thing to know too is that if you're not going to the extension and instead you're just going to be inside the Capitol building, on the second floor and also I think the third floor, that's where the House and Senate chambers are. It looks like, I think the Senate chamber is on the east side of the Capitol, so closest to the garage, and the House chamber is on the west side of the Capitol. And this is where your representatives will go to make votes, to debate, and sometimes there can be testimony there as well. On the third floor, you can also access the galleries. Sometimes in recent times, the rules have been a little up in the air about who can access them because of COVID, but I think you can still access I think you can still access and see these chambers. I went after COVID and it was relatively straightforward for me. But this is where you can see your representatives at work, voting or not voting. And if you want to take a look, this is one way. Okay, so you have your testimony, you are prepped, you know how to get inside the Capitol. The next thing is, if you're not giving a testimony, for instance, and if you just have an issue you want to talk about and you have your pitch and you're ready to talk, you can also go to legislators' offices. Let's move on to the next bit. Now, we recommend that if you want to get a really good chance and an opportunity to speak with your representative's staff or the representative themselves, you should try to schedule a meeting in advance. And there are a few ways to do this. If you already know a staff email or an email to the representative's office, you can go ahead and let them know, like, hey, I would like to visit to talk about this issue. My name is so-and-so. I live in this part of Houston or Austin or wherever in the state that you live, and offer up or ask for some times in the coming weeks when you would like to drop by their office to meet to talk about a certain issue. They're there to work for you. So really, hopefully if you provide a few times because your schedule is pretty busy, and this isn't, this is their job and this is what they're there to do. Hopefully they'll be able to work with you to be able to meet with you. Especially if you are a constituent, that means that, of a particular office, if you're going to see your representative, then they should really do as much as they can to try and make sure that they can see you and hear you and listen. You can also, like if you visit the Capitol and you didn't plan on visiting a certain representative, but you heard from someone that, oh, hey, you should also speak to Representative Bay, and you decide, okay, I want to actually go talk to this person. I hadn't planned on it. You can absolutely drop by that office, right? This is our government. We have access to it, and you're welcome to go to some of these offices and go in and leave behind materials. You can also ask for a discussion. You may not get it because if you're walking in, they need time to prepare or plan or make sure that staff are available. So that's why we recommend calling ahead or emailing. to set up a meeting beforehand. But all the same, you're still welcome to try and have a meeting that day that you might be there. Sometimes the offices may be closed. You know, the staff, some of these staffs can be a bit small. So, you know, people may be at a hearing, people may be in a meeting somewhere, and their office may just be locked, or they may not be available. So you'll be out of luck. But much of the time, especially now that we're in session, you can be able to drop in to your visit to your legislator. I'm gonna try to be conscious of speaking slowly. My apologies, Lily. Okay, this is a picture of me from my short hair days, testifying at the legislature. And that's not at the legislature, but it's a good picture. So if you want to testify, if I don't say so myself, if you want to testify at the legislature, you need to do one thing. You need to register. So in addition to like writing what you're going to say, being ready to speak for 2 minutes, sometimes in the Senate, or 3 minutes in the House, you need to go and let the Congress, let the legislature know that you're there to testify. And what you should probably do if you're going to a specific hearing, and there are hearing notices that are put on the Texas website. So for instance, I have been going to testify on the proposed budgets for the state. I've gone to a Senate Finance Committee hearing, and I've also gone to a House Appropriations Committee hearing. Those committees have websites within the state government website that you can go to. They have web pages, and you can go there and look up the notices. So, you know, they need to notify the public like, hey, we're going to meet on Monday at this time at 8 a.m. and we're going to hear from all of these different agencies, Department of Public Safety, the Texas Military Department, and more. They notify the public. Often organizations like the Texas Civil Rights Project or others who are advocating for certain issues will try to alert folks to let you all know that there's a hearing coming up. And we really want people to come and share their stories, let their representatives know what they need. And so we'll try to tell you when a hearing is coming up and whether or not we'll be there, so that way you can join us, or you should definitely just go on your own. But these are the times when you can go and speak directly to your representatives, speak to several of them, hear them ask questions of government agencies. And as this slide is talking about, you need to register. On the House side, there is a kiosk. So it's a computer that you go to. They're typically there are several of them right outside hearing rooms. And that is where you'll enter in your identifying information, your name, I think a number. I can't remember if email is a part of it, but really what's important is specifying that you're there to testify on a particular bill. And you want to be able to say whether or not you're opposing it, you're going to be neutral on it, or you're going to be in favor of it. You may also have to answer whether or not you're part of an organization. So when I testified, for instance, I registered as part of the Texas Civil Rights Project because that is my occupation. That's what I was there doing. The Senate side has one difference from the House in that you may need to testify with the card. So it's a paper, register with a card. So it is a paper registration form. And it's basically the same thing, your name, what you're there to testify on, what bill. So for mine, when I went to the Senate Finance, I wrote Senate Bill 1, that was the budget. And then I was testifying against billions of dollars for things like the border wall, for instance. Once you finish registering, you can go into the hearing room, sit down, and just take it easy. It can be a very, very long day. And you can start listening to your legislators and be ready for testimony. Sometimes they do it the hearing comes in different in different order. They can do agency, a particular agency that, and then public testimony, and then another agency, and then public testimony. Or they can go through all the agencies that are supposed to be there, all the witnesses, all the state witnesses that are going and reporting on different aspects of the government before they move forward with public testimony. And this past yesterday, I was there. I got there at 8 a.m., registered at a kiosk, and then testified at around 2 p.m., I think, or 1 to 2 p.m. That was after all the government witnesses went, and then it was open for public testimony. I think that's what we got. Yep, so I started to go into this. One thing that you need to make sure that you do is that you're there, and when they call your name, you need to be ready to go up because you could miss your shot. Hopefully at the end, they'll go, if you miss being called, let's say you needed to go to the restroom or you went out to grab a bite to eat and you missed public testimony. They hopefully at the end will go through the folks they missed, but it's really not good to leave it up to chance. And as best you can, it's important to try and stay in the hearing room whenever you get the sense or that they're going to start moving to testimony. One other thing too is that all of these hearings are streamed online. So if you want to go grab something from the grill, you want to go to the restroom or go somewhere else, you can also stream it on your phone and just keep an eye on things and see how it's going. One more thing that I will recommend, like just 100%, keep some snacks on you because it can be really frustrating to be very hungry and to be sitting there and waiting to be called, and your stomach starts to gurgle, and then it can feel weird. So anyways, that's my advice. What is next? Oh, let's go back one more. I have one more thing to say, and then we can wrap up on this portion. One thing that's really important to do, and I know organizations like mine will do our best to try and inform everyone about what else is needed. When I testified in front of the Senate a few weeks ago, I needed to bring 40 copies of my testimony. And what you do with those copies, you bring them into the hearing room. Also, when you walk into the hearing room for the Senate side, the registration cards will typically be like right there in the front, and it'll say, I can't remember the exact text, but it's usually, in large, bolded, fancy font, something to the effect of register here. And so you can pick up your card and put your information, and then you'll take that to the very end of the hearing room. It's called the dais, or where the senators are sitting. And there's a clerk. The committee clerk is who you want to find. They're typically on the opposite ends of the room. This can be a bit confusing, so if you get lost, you can just ask around, and most people will typically be helpful. You would want to take that registration card to the clerk. The copies that you have, you will also hold on to, or you can give them, I think it depends on the order. You can give them to the clerk then, or hold on to them until you're being called for, and then you'll hand it to the clerk. But it is important. The main takeaway here is that it's really important that when a committee is going to have a hearing, that you read the rules and read what is required, so that when you show up and you're going to testify, you have those 40 copies. Yesterday, when I testified before the House, I was only required to register on the computer, and I didn't need to bring any copies. So all I had to do was register and then come forward and read my testimony before the committee. So it can depend a little bit. Like I said, we'll do our best to try and keep you informed about what you need. But you can find all of this on the Texas State Legislature's website, and you can search around and find some of those rules, or you can email us and we can try our best to answer your questions in case it's still confusing. To wrap this section up, I would just like to say that this portion of it Jenny talked about the structure and how the government works, how the bills move through. And what I talked about right now are the different ways that you can take part. And it's so, I can't emphasize how important it is to get all of your voices heard. It's more powerful when stories come in, when legislators get to see their constituents and hear what their concerns are and hear the very real challenges that people might have, or what is needed to be changed in our government. And so whether it's dropping by your representative's office and leaving out a statement, note, information, things that you want them to do, or going to a hearing, which is when the bills are moving through the process, going to a hearing and speaking about a particular bill, how it can be harmful or how it can be good, or whether it's going to the Capitol, getting out of that garage and coming and like testifying protesting with us and making a lot of noise so that way they know we're angry about something. All of these things, getting there to the Capitol can be very, very important. And I hope that you do some of these things and take part in your government. And I think that's it. I'm looking forward to answering some questions from folks. I'm going to pass it over to Alexis now.
Thanks, Roberto. So I just wanted to say that before we take questions, and I know there's a few in the chat, this presentation, along with some other materials, will be made available after the presentation. We'll email it out along with the recording of the presentation. So if there's something you saw that you wish you could see again or something like that, don't worry, we'll get this to you. And then I know we had some questions outstanding in the chat. I know some questions got answered, but let me go ahead and I saw, here we go. I saw it here from Bridget. When you get a chance, can you list points where bills can be killed?
Bills can be killed. If we go back to that slide that shows the whole process, bills can be killed pretty much anywhere between any of the boxes. So there are a lot of bills that will be filed, and I'm going to do better to speak slowly. There are a lot of bills that are filed and they get assigned to a committee and then they are never heard in committee. There are a lot of bills that get voted out of committee and they never make it to the floor of either house. So there's a lot of different points in our system that a bill can be killed for different reasons. And there's basically anywhere there's a change in box or an arrow, that's a place where a bill could be killed. I don't know that that's a helpful answer. It's just there's a lot of places where bills can die.
Thanks, Jenny. And then the other question, also from Bridget, is, I might have missed this, but can you testify in writing for all or just when noted? And this might have been a specific slide, Roberto.
Could you ask me the question one more time, Alexis?
Can you testify in writing for all or just when noted?
You should be able to testify in writing for all of the bills. To my best knowledge, I don't think you need to be there to provide oral testimony. I think you should be able to provide written testimony for everything. Is that right, Jenny?
Importantly, you have to do it while the hearing is in progress. So if you go to that, when you go to the Texas Legislature's website and you look at the committee hearings, they have an agenda, and you have to make sure that you submit the testimony while the hearing is going on. And I just put in the chat the link to the House witness registration. So you can actually fill out a profile at home so that when you get there, it's faster for you to actually register as a witness. And then you can, find your profile when you get there.
And Jenny, is that, so there's the question right after is, so you still need to be there in person to submit written testimony?
You can, yeah, Wasik said you can submit written comment before any committee hearing. So you can submit the written comments and you don't have to be in person. Yeah, we've mainly done it in person. So when you go in person, you also can, like what Roberto was saying, you can bring paper copies of all of your testimony. If you're really not comfortable, but you still want to go in person, you can certainly do that.
And
Awesome.
also on the committee hearing notices, there will be links to where you can submit your testimony online. If you would prefer to do written testimony, or you can only do written testimony and you can't come to the Capitol, going through the state legislature's website and finding where they announce that there's a hearing coming up, there are links there that you will click on to submit written testimony.
Awesome. Thanks, Roberto. I saw there was a question about dress code and Jenny answered in the chat. I think a great answer. And then I see a few chats and I see a few hands. I'll go ahead and take some of the hands right now and then we can jump back to the chat. So I'm going to unmute Al and you can go ahead and ask your question. Or I need to ask to unmute.
That worked?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. I recently, well, about a year and a half ago, I moved back to Texas from Virginia. And I was really politically active in Virginia, did a lot of issue lobbying, worked on redistricting reform, things like that. Is there anything here in Texas like lobbyist in a box? They had something they called lobbyist in a box where you could set up a file basically and follow the bills you were interested in. Jenny's shaking her head.
Yes, I did. Yeah, you can. So if you go to the Texas Legislature online, I was trying to quickly pull up the website. You can set up a profile basically. And you can track the different bills. You can track by committee. You can track even by like subject matter. And it will send you updates on the different bills. So let me share that. Here
Great.
you go. So once you create a profile, and use that power carefully because you can get a lot of emails. But that's also good. Let me show you. I don't think I can actually show this to you, but it's called My TLO, and this is the website. And the other thing that you can do is when you go to that website, you can actually you can search by bill, you can search by text, and you can search and you can decide what kind of alerts you want to get. So if you want to get it by bill, if you want to get it by committee, or based on subject.
Great, that's very helpful. Also, if you don't mind, is there in Virginia is also an independent group that does it's called Virginia Public Access program, and they have all kinds of information. They gather news from across Virginia. They have places where you can research who's donating to campaigns, things like that. Does anybody in Texas do anything like that?
I would say yes, but it also is by different issue.
Okay.
And so there's a lot of different groups. I hesitate to name them out individually, but there's a lot of different groups that track the legislature and help kind of guide you through what different legislators are following and how they're voting and are on specific issues. We have 3 different newsletters that we send out for our programs, where we discuss the different bills that we're tracking, and tell you kind of how those are moving through the ledge. And then, yeah, here's a resource that Wasik, who's also with therapy, put in the chat that has some of that same information.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask, do you guys have a like a structure to create a strategic plan? I've gone to the legislature before, and it's hard to meet with the actual reps. Usually you just get to talk with their staff. And how do we know which legislators should we speak to on committees? And also, do you guys have any templates to create a literature to leave behind for the legislators?
So I can answer a part of that question. In terms of representatives and committees, just as was mentioned before, you can utilize the TLO website. Each program sends out an email with bill summaries that include the name of representatives. And those bill summaries also have the committee's bills have been referred to, if they've been referred to a committee or if they've moved past that. And so, and there's other resources like this, but you can always look at bills that you are particularly concerned about or really want to show support for, and identify if it has moved into a committee, which committee that is, who's the author of the bill. And then you can look up just on the government website, right? Like who's on what committee, right? Which representatives are on which committee. So then you can identify targets in terms of who you might want to reach out to. Something that's helpful is to think of it this way: of who is a champion on this committee who would, if you want to support the bill, who will champion for the bill, or who is a champion who can defend against a not so great bill, right? And then start thinking about how you might want to reach out to that representative and communicate why they should support or not support a bill. As for a strategic plan, I don't know if Roberto or Jenny, you have any thoughts on that part?
I think if, yeah, go ahead.
I think it depends on the issue that you're referring to. I think your name was Daniel, because that can. There are a lot of different, when it comes to trying to get some of this legislation passed or to change and to move forward priorities. There are often a lot of different organizations or groups that might be working on a particular issue. So if there's one particular item that you have in mind, it might also be good to connect with some of these folks, because they would be able to give you a good understanding of who the champions are, of what the path is, to what some of the priorities are within that group, to try and move issues forward, because it can take a lot of time to really get some of the wins or changes that you might be looking for. And there are a lot of people often who have been putting in work to move that forward. And so getting together with them and strategizing with them is a good way to try and move that work forward, because there's power in numbers. Sorry, Jenny, go for it.
No, I was just going to say, I think it also depends, like you said, on the issue and the type of bill. So if it's a bill that's bad, but is part of the priority of the governor or the lieutenant governor, so you know it's going to be moving forward, it's probably going to get traction to move forward, then you might have a strategy that's around trying to amend it to soften the language, kind of do harm mitigation. If it's a bill that is positive and what you're looking for is a champion, the challenge with the Texas Legislature meeting every other year is that it takes a long time for stuff oftentimes to get through. And so you're looking at kind of a long game with introducing something and then it takes multiple sessions. So you can look on the legislature's on the legislation page that we put there, the webpage, at the history of previous sessions. And so if there's a bill that's been filed and the language was filed the session before, you can also look at, who filed it before, what was the language, and that gives you a sense of if, there's momentum that's been built around a certain issue and who have been the champions around that issue. And the other sort of thing about the template or things like that, I think the really important thing to think about with the legislature, and it's both the question of what should you wear and what should you say, is that this is your government. And the important thing is to be authentic. And if you're leaving something behind, it doesn't have to be in a perfect format. It's more, are you saying something that is memorable and that connects with why this issue is important to you? Yeah, and people do coordinate their colors with their t-shirts. And I was thinking actually, because it was the Lege on Monday, that I think I've reached my final legislature avatar. Because when I first started this work, when I was an undergrad, I tried to be real professional in a suit. And I did that for 15 years. And now I'm wearing comfortable shoes and a cardigan because I just really am over it. So I think you should go in what makes you feel good and makes you feel confident to speak to your legislators. And the same way that the way that you're speaking to them, it's just like you get convinced by people that you can tell care about something and have something to say about it. The legislature is a bunch of people who want to hear what you have to say. They don't always want to hear what we have to say, but theoretically.
Roberto, you were gonna answer a question from earlier?
I think we're okay on time. Sorry, I think that person had to go, so we're okay with that.
Okay, I wanted to get there was a question in the chat that was in Spanish from Genoviva, and the question was, can you give an example of something that would be vetoed, or an example of maybe how the veto works?
I'm trying to remember. There was a bill last session that, so I previously was working on violence prevention, and there was a bill related to informing students about domestic partner and intimate partner violence that Abbott vetoed, and he claimed that he vetoed it for some kind of weird reasons related to the amendment, but it seemed like they just didn't want the education in schools. So it's not, I think that there's a lot of different reasons why Abbott vetoes things, or any of the governors veto things, and it's oftentimes if it doesn't align with their political agenda, or if it's been an amendment that they don't care for, he doesn't care for.
Another example of that is Abbott vetoed legislative funding in retaliation for the quorum break. And because he vetoed it after session, the bill died because there was no opportunity to override it. So that's another example. Okay, perfecto. And then I see Oscar, you have your hand up.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
We can hear you. Can you hear
Oh,
us?
okay. Yeah, I just wanted confirmation before I started asking, but no, so I was more curious about, I'm actually working on having my state rep file a bill for me, but it's taking me longer than I'd like. Do you know the deadline for them to file bills? Like, what's the deadline? I know it's coming up.
I think the drafting deadline has passed, if you want the House to do it, but the filing deadline is March 10th.
Okay, gotcha.
So what the drafting deadline means is that if you wanted someone to file it, you would have to come with the language already drafted.
Oh, I see. I see. Gosh. Okay. Maybe. I don't know. Is there a way to maybe if we do it as an amendment to a bill, or do we have to? Is that passed already too?
Amendments go on forever.
Okay. Okay, then probably have to do that then. Thank you.
Is there an amendment deadline, Jenny?
I honestly don't know. I don't feel like I don't think there is. Does Emily, do you know, or Wasik, is there's a
So no, there's no specific amendment deadline. Amendments are usually added on the House floor or the Senate floor as soon as bills come up for debate. So to the person asking the question, sorry, I missed your name. But I would recommend discussing those options with your representative or senator that you're talking to, and see if related to any other bill that's filed this session, if that bill can be added as an amendment to a similar bill. I think that because the bill filing deadline is next Friday, March 10th, you still have a little bit of time, but it is really urgent. So I would go ahead and ping your representative about and follow up about getting that filed as soon as possible.
Awesome. Thank you, Wasik. All right, last question, because we're a bit over time. Al, you get the final question. No pressure.
Well, this is actually in reaction to something Alexis, I think, said, was that there was a bill that the governor vetoed and that it basically died because there couldn't be a vote on it. Does the legislative calendar not include a veto session post-budget?
That may be a James question. James in the chat said no veto session.
Really? Okay, that's different.
Yeah,
Thank you.
James is saying he has a line item veto. Yeah, fun times. And just as is being mentioned in the chat, because Daniel asked a really great question of how to learn more about how the Texas Ledge works. We're continuously posting about the legislature on our social media. So again, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, please follow us. We're going to be having updates. We're going to be at the Capitol testifying. You will probably see many of us there. Come say hi. We're friendly, I promise. As you see on this slide, you have our emails. Don't be shy. Send us emails. We love answering questions. We love providing information, or at least pointing you in the right direction. We have really appreciated y'all's questions and just your time. I see in the chat, is there an action day dedicated around voting rights? I might allow that one last little question for any of our voting rights peeps. Is there any answers for Emily about a voting rights advocacy day before we close out?
Nothing specific planned yet, but if you sign up for our email list, you'll be the first to know.
That's right. I did share in the chat our email updates. Each program sends them out every single week. You will have all the bill summaries for our priorities, including new bills and some other news. I mean, I think they're amazing, but then again, I type those up with my teammates, so I obviously think they're amazing, but I think you will too, so please sign up for our emails. And again, thanks y'all, we really appreciate your time, and again, your questions and attention.
Have a great night.
Thanks, y'all.
Muchas gracias. Buenas noches.
Thank you very
Gracias.
much. Good evening.
Buenas noches, Ramona. Okay, y'all, I'm gonna end it.
Buenas noches, gracias.
Gracias, Noemi.
Good evening. Good. I have a question. Would it, can I ask like a very short, like a tiny question?
Sure.
Ok, buenas noches, mi nombre es
Hi,
Noemi.
good evening. My name is Noemi VI. I'm a member of TOP. And can you bring, could you bring a question, or can you go and talk to them about schools, about education? Can you do that too?
Absolutely. I mean, there really isn't anything you can't talk about with your representative or a representative. But education is a big one. It was a priority in the governor's state of the state. I mean, it's a huge issue, right? So definitely feel empowered to talk about education and the concerns you have around education.
There are also there's an education committee.
Sí, hoy en día. Oh, ok. ¿Y cómo puedo?
Okay. So how can I contact them?
So you can find their information. I'll try to get you the link right now. But it depends on where you live too, Noemi, because if you're in the valley, for instance, if you're in the Rio
Vivo
Grande,
en Dallas.
in Dallas,
I live in Dallas.
Vivo en la ciudad en Dallas, Texas.
I live in the city of Dallas, Texas.
También está la organización HIDRA.
There's also HIDRA, an organization that works on issues related with legislation. And there is San Antonio, but they have the workshops and to educate you on how to do advocacy over there.
Me encantaría.
I would love to.
Mi señal se está
Oh, I think my signal is iffy. I'm gonna switch to my phone.
so yes,
Thank you.
thank you, Noemi.
Una disculpa, perdón, se cayó mi señal.
An apology. I'm so sorry. My computer, the signal in my computer died. But I would really appreciate if somebody could give me the link or connect me in anything related to education.
Could you, Noemi, could you email us and we can get back to you with more? But one thing that's probably important is to find your representative in Dallas, because if, for instance, one of your, okay. Because if we know where you're at in Dallas, we may be able to connect you with your representative. There are some really good ones in the area, like I think Anchia is out there, for instance, and his staff would probably take the time to get you connected. But one of our WASIC put into the chat if you're on your phone, you can see that there's a link for the House committee and the Senate. And if you click on those two links, you can see the two spaces in the legislature that really focus on education. And WASIC also put a link in there to find who represents you. You can call them and ask them about what they're doing on education.
Me encantaría. De hecho, estoy preparándome.
I would love to do that. I'm actually preparing to be a school defender. And yes, I would love to do that. I'm going to click on the part of education. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for everything.
Thank you so much, everyone. Have a good night.
Igual, bye-bye.
Okay, I'm going to close it
Likewise.
out, y'all. Thank you.